Good evening, Divesh. We're gonna start in a style today. I apologize to the listeners because the conversation you and I have been heavy about the level of service. Sometimes it can drive you crazy. You can relate to that, right?
No, fully agreed, Sam. Just for the listeners, this is Divesh Motilal, engineer, a resident DJ of Kometsa, and welcome to the listeners as well. And agreed, Sam. I think we've touched on this discussion point that the level of service, and I don't know if it's just in our local South African environment or whether it's something uh, on a global scale where it seems as if the customer care have this tunnel vision or they've got a script, and the moment a customer goes off the script, then
Mm,
they want to cut you off and pass you on to somebody else. I mean,
yeah.
it's very dangerous, and I think this is also one of the challenges also in our sector,
Mm,
that of technology sometimes taking away the power of individuals and allowing them to say, this isn't my, or this phenomenal of not in my backyard type of thing extended into
right.
service delivery.
Yeah.
You find that when you ask someone to do something which is out of their normal script,
Mm,
they don't even want to talk to another department within their own organization. They
mm.
just want to tell you, no, sorry,
It's out of my scope.
out of my scope. Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, very interesting. And if you panic, you can actually end up causing yourself unnecessary stress. But that is the technology that we live with, because everything is sort of like left to technology to first work and dictate before the human interventions comes in. But anyway, welcome to the show. Yeah, a nice way to start.
It's interesting, Sam, as well, that if you look at it, and of course, I think it comes with the experience and foresight that we've developed with the program that we're talking about, the digital online streaming mastery, the do's and don'ts in particular.
Mm,
You find if you really get into it, the do's and don'ts is even applicable to other service industries. It's not just for online.
indeed.
Of course, we've streamlined it towards online broadcasting in particular.
Mm,
But I mean, the do's and don'ts, a simple one of listening, being attentive to your customer.
yeah,
In our situation, it could be the audience who we perceive as the customer, or it could be the guest that we have on the show who we can perceive as our customer. If we're
yeah.
not listening to them and we just stick to our script, it's not going to be a success and it's not going to be a sustainable thing. So,
Indeed. And exactly the reason why we say be mindful how you start the show. Don't leave the listeners behind. Keep them always at the back of your mind, because the reason why you are streaming is because of them. The whole issue of customer centricity must actually determine how you behave when you are confronted with the requirement for service, like the example you and I we were discussing, we were sharing just now.
yes, indeed. And I hope, I mean, our listeners, our future students, they come to a point where they can have that insight that the skills and the lessons that we are trying to impart to our listeners and future students actually is broader than just for the online broadcasting. It's something they can utilize in other areas of their life and use other areas of their lives to also enhance and make their online uh, journey and experience much more fulfilling. Sam.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, let's put it in context. We wanted today to talk about the unit number 10, conduct. Is it conduct number 5? Conduct
Yes.
number 5, checking in and studying the talk show. Um, Yesterday, when we had a conversation in the trainer session, we spoke about how short the time is that you have to check in and start the show, and yet how impactful this aspect of the show is. So much so that when you're studying this unit, be aware that you're not going to have so much time to cover everything that is in the unit, but in the back of your mind, you need to have it and make sure that you tick all the boxes in terms of what you achieve in that 5 minutes of checking in. And which means, therefore, it's even more important that you are very attentive as you are learning it, and you learn then to address all these issues without necessarily having to mention everything. So it's a very difficult unit because we are saying learn all these things, but apply them in this short period of time. Depending on the situation, you will approach it differently. I
Indeed,
don't know whether
indeed.
you applied your mind when you were looking the script. It's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yes, indeed, Sam. And I agree with you fully. It is a very difficult module.
Mm.
In that, from my perspective, my experience that I've had being one of the graduates of the digital online streaming mastery program that Kometsa had offered, it's really something which is not necessarily part of the planning which we've been talking about in lots of our past modules. This
Mhm.
is where your intuition comes, or where the intuition mostly will get developed. And what I mean by that, Sam, is you could do your planning, but this part or this module is about having that sense, the finger on the pulse at that point in time, to measure, to see whether your guest is on the right frame as you had planned for, whether
Mm.
your co-host is in that right frame, and if not, readjust how you're going to actually go about the program, and in particular, how you're going to bring everyone back into the right frame of mind so that you can get as close to the script as possible, Sam.
Yeah, yeah. Let's welcome Maynard. Maynard, welcome, my friend. We are happy to have you here. We're talking conduct number 10 and module, um, I mean,
Number number
conduct
10,
unit number 10, conduct number 5.
5, yes.
Welcome to you.
Thanks, Dr. Sam.
Evening, Maynard.
Good evening, Divesh. Good evening, the listeners. Good evening, Dr. Sam.
Yeah, yeah. We're talking about we have had a look at so much of the content that is covered in that unit, but also what we are discussing now is how difficult it is to condense it into one and make sure that you haven't left anything that is crucial for a slow smoothing into the actual show itself. What are your views there, Maynard?
Dr. Sam?
Yeah, I say how did you when you got to look at those points that we share under this unit and having to grapple with how you make sure that all those are considered. For instance, you know you have to keep at the back of your mind the objectives why you do check in and how you face your start of a show rather than pouncing into it. And and yet you have so much limited time because I don't think any show will allow you to spend more than 5 minutes doing the checking in and introduction.
Yeah, definitely. Like the check-in time is a limited time, and at the end of the day, you still need to cover most of the important information. And just to make sure that you first base with your clients or guests, just to make sure that they're settled down on the show, and make sure that they're also connecting with the listeners as well. So definitely you need to make sure that you summarize all the objectives and the value propositions of the show in less than maybe 3 minutes or so.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, let's talk about what are the objectives of having to think through something like this, Divesh?
Oh, for me, Sam, we would have obviously done as we've outlined in our previous shows, the whole aspect of how we plan and how we're going to introduce the platform, the guests, the hosts, and the like. And when it comes to the point where you're doing the live broadcast, things might have changed. So it's a level of intuition where you start to do the introduction, you get a sense of how the you are feeling firstly, how your guest might be feeling, how your co-hosts might be feeling, and if, as Maynard had touched on, if you sense that there's a bit of uneasiness, if you sense that the nerves is a bit high strung,
Yeah,
then there is mechanisms which you could use to unstring them
yeah,
and get everything back on track. So for me, the checking in part is basically to get a sense of are we on the right vibration, if I can put it that way.
yeah.
And if not, try to bring yourself, the team, the guest, and of course you can't control the audience, but the audience is already expecting your show to go in a certain way, the certain momentum, certain vibration that you would put out. So the checking in part is very, very important. But as well, it's a very difficult thing which you would only attain as you get practice and as you also be cognizant of all the different modules which we've already discussed, Sam.
Indeed, indeed. Minette will remember very much so yesterday during the trainer session that we said it's almost like all the previous units are now sort of like culminating into this one, because checking in means also introductions, right? Of the station, of the guest, of the topic, of the co-host, of the anchor. But now we are calling it all checking in. Within that, you do all those things. And the reason why you do them is to quickly acknowledge who's in charge and then connect with the listeners and then hook them by telling them the topic and the exciting guest that you're going to have. So you can't actually jump those. If you jump and you are in a talk, you're going to be forced to come back and say, by the way, we are discussing 1, 2, 3 with so and so. And it might only seasoned anchors and hosts do that. And sometimes they do it purposefully to leave the listeners wondering a little bit. I wonder who is this person they are talking to. Have you also experienced that type of a style, Maynard, where people purposefully don't introduce who they are talking to? They want you to wonder a little bit, but if you let them wonder too long, you may lose the listeners.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because the checking point is a summary of the show in general. Because you need to make sure that you touch on all the contacts of the whole program, just so that you can summarize like are you speaking to and the name of your program and all those things all in one. And yes, of course, like most of our well-known presenters, they tend to forget to introduce their guest at the right time. And yes, like most of the people, they might lose interest on the show because they have been wondering who is that person, and they're not saying it in time. And they end up maybe saying it at a later stage, even sometimes even after their commercial break. That's why now
Mm,
they start introducing their guest, and it takes too long for somebody to wonder who is that guest, and yeah, they end up losing interest in some way.
mm. But I do sometimes see that they do that intentionally, that they will talk about the person without mentioning the name. Of course, it's still introduction, and they hang you a little bit, and it brings some excitement. And then later on, they say, the person we are talking about is Maynard.
Yeah, if sometimes like if maybe they can say like the person we're going to talk about is an entrepreneur in its own right, they specialize in this and this, and then maybe yes, in that way, uh, it can keep the listeners maybe waiting a bit just to hear who's that person that they're going to introduce after all that introduction. But if they can't introduce or give some hints about that guest, that's when now they start to lose listeners. But if maybe they keep on giving the hints and about that particular guest, then in that way, sometimes yes, the listeners can hook
Yeah.
around.
They even make it exciting.
I think as well, Menard and Stam, Menard had joined us a little bit late, but we started the show off a little different today because there was something already on our mind, uh,
Mm.
myself and Sam, and it was relating to certain services being delivered in different industries. And hence we continued with that to also then get that vibration right
Mm.
and link that feeling that we had into the show today. So that is an intuition, part of check-in, I would say as well, that we will develop as you get more experience. And like Sam had mentioned, you do get seasoned hosts, broadcasters who can flip the script, if I can put it that way, but still come back to the vibration that the audience is expecting of that broadcaster. That only comes with time.
Yeah.
Uh, until you get to that point, your do's and don'ts actually help you develop this intuition that I think is also important for checking in, and all the various modules, the myriad of modules we've already gone through, and the ones that we're also still going to go through, gets rolled into this 3 to 5 minutes, but it's also a intuition over and above the knowledge and skills that we would be imparting on the Cometsa's digital online streaming mastery program, which you would also develop into the situation that you need to really be a seasoned broadcaster, Sam.
Yeah. Indeed. You start first with regulations or guidelines or this in this case conduct, but over time you don't even think about them because now you develop a way of being the behavior and you are comfortable to play around with it. And I think Maynard will listen to the podcast. It was quite for the first time actually we felt comfortable that we start that way because we wanted the listeners to experience the emotions that we were experiencing seconds before we could even start the show. Because if we just cut off and went into the mode of formalities, we wouldn't have actually we would have not sounded very well. Man, Dinesh, I didn't feel comfortable to just cut that. I just felt that let's take it these emotions into the show, but we put it in a way that they understand that there must have been something that is actually being occupying our mind, and we are just as we finish and coming into the show, we are just sort of like facing it in, and then we shared with them a little bit of snippets of what our views are about service delivery and even touching on technology that could almost make service delivery very difficult because the discussion was around the service as a result of the miscommunication or some unexpected notifications from a technology platform, which was actually the reason why we felt comfortable we could bring it.
100%, Sam. And like I say, if you had planned, we had obviously planned our show, how everything is going to go. But now there's something in our life which have happened, an event,
Mm.
and you're not fully focused. So it's okay. And once you are seasoned enough, you bring that in, and part of your check-in would be to ventilate that experience,
Yeah.
share it with your audience, share it with your guest, your co-host, not go into it in detail, but just sharing it releases that so-called, let's say, tension that's occupying a part of your mind, releasing it so that you're now fully cognizant and aware with the show and the plan that you had initially had. So
Mm. And I did feel like that, and it felt very good, man.
Yeah, no, I can hear that like in some way you started the show by connecting to the current affairs, which is quite interesting. I just like yes, I joined you guys late, but it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, as a show host, recognize the emotions, bring them in. Obviously, don't overindulge, but you are a human being, and it's good to share with people what you are going through as a check-in. Yeah, so the value proposition of checking in, the way you touch on that is that it actually allows you to have a good start, which will almost lay the foundation for the success of the entire show. So there's a value in it. Short as it is, the value is it lays the foundation, and therefore you cannot ignore it because you can't build a house on a foundation that doesn't exist or on a weak foundation.
Yes, perfectly put, Sam.
Mm.
Um, I would also add to say that, with the program that we have as Cometza, we can teach you the skills, the do's and the don'ts. But like we're saying as well, it's definitely a very crucial element of the show that you're going to have when you're going live in particular, where you got a sense and have that intuition that, okay, this was the plan, but we need to just touch and tweak it a little bit so we can get everything back on the rails so that the rest of the show can flow along that planning that you have done
Yeah,
previously
yeah.
before you had started the show, Sam.
Yeah, and make it real because it shows us about the real stuff. It's not when you are learning, you can stick to the rules and everything, but when you are applying it, you need to stick to the real life situation. Which brings me to something that I thought we should highlight, and that is uh, when we say checking in, it's not a new topic altogether. It's actually, as I said earlier on, is an aggregation of all the different kind of introductions that we have gone through them. In Unit 9, Conduct 4, we touched on introduction of the channel or the platform. In Unit 6, Conduct 1, we spoke about self-introduction. In other words, introduction of yourself as a host or co-host or anchor. And then in Unit 7, Conduct 2, we spoke about introduction of your co-hosts if you are hosting with somebody. And then in Unit 8, Conduct 3, we spoke about introduction of the guests. And now I know we purposely left introduction of the topic and the theme to the very last, which will be at Unit 39, Conduct 34. And the reason we do that is because that is a huge topic on its own because it's about the topic. How do you decide what you are going to talk about in the radio and what informs that? Now, if I leave that one, Unit 39, and just focus on the unit I've shared, we are saying now they all form the chapters of checking in. And you have to do it within 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And that is a huge chapters, like when you were to look into details on what to do and what not to do in terms of those units and their conduct. So for the to go into deep into that, like they are a very big chapters. But when you go to into live now on the studio, now you have to summarize it in less than 5 minutes. That's quite interesting because now you have to summarize all the units and all the contacts. So you need to master
Yeah.
every unit and every contact.
And you and colleagues yesterday, we spoke about the discipline of that first section, that every time you listen to people checking into their shows, it appears like they say it off the cuff. But we are saying that as a professional, that is not always a case. It's not always allowed. You have to have a script, almost that you follow, because it's so crucial that you can make a mistake. Yes, you become seasoned, you do it, but you still have a script to guide you so that you don't actually take things for granted and think that you can jump and hope that you wouldn't be having a guest there feeling lost when you don't tell them when
Yeah,
you don't.
because if you,
Yes, man.
I was still saying, like, if you can't script it down, it's easier for you to miss one of the contact, and you might find yourself missing the very important contact, or maybe of just introducing the studio or the station you are at. So
Yes.
it's easier to miss the one of the contacts. So it will be very important to script it down.
Yeah. Uh, Divesh, I know you're gonna be having a show tomorrow at the is it tomorrow? Yes, the
Yes.
VUT show. What is going on in your mind right now as we're discussing this and you're thinking of your show tomorrow?
To be honest with you, Sam, I've got my partial script, but I'm a bit nervous now because even though I'm confident in my abilities, it's not just you who's part of it. There's many wheels that make the machine to operate, and I need to get my guest to be on the same page as me. I need to understand my guest a bit better so that we go as close to the script as possible, and of course produce a piece of quality work that we can give to our listeners. So there's that element of nervousness because I'm feeling as if the vibration is not right as
Yes,
yet with
yeah.
my guest in particular, Sam.
So
And just
you're still going to connect with the guest between now and tomorrow.
yes, indeed. Of course, that's not ideal, but as long as it can be done. Of course, we've done some interaction with the guest to give them a taste of what we would like to achieve. We need to just have that engagement with them to see that what we envisage is the same from both our sides, and of course, we understand each other in terms of how we're gonna, sort of play the game, or while we are online and we are streaming live.
Mm, mm.
Just to also add into the point that Maynard had raised, yes, indeed, my experience with the program itself, with all the conducts, it's an immense task. It's a lot of material. A lot of it, as we also have outlined in our previous shows, may initially seem to that which is not as aware as us to be something very simple, but once you start getting into the details and being able to take that knowledge and apply it into a real life situation, you will see that it can be complicated. And as daunting as this task may seem, the only way you can take all of this material, all the different conducts and modules, and summarize each one and make sure that your script is covering each one of those is through practice as well as through.
Ke tao founela back ne ke sa le ko meeting.
May not. Sorry, sorry. Hold it there, Divesh. I think Maynard is talking in the background.
No problem, Sam.
Maynard, I've muted you. Please mute yourself when you talk. Thanks, Divesh.
And thank you, Sam. So what I was saying is that it's very important to be part of a program such as what Cometsa offers in terms of the digital online streaming mastery program, where we not only show you the conducts and the different skill sets that you need to hone in on and develop further, but you have the platform available where you can do practice shows as well as get the feedback that's necessary from other participants, the producers, other more experienced resident DJs, so that you can also see and listen for yourself where you're going wrong, where you can improve, and where you can really grow into your own. And that is also what leads us to today's area of discussion, the check in. That
Mm.
comes from that level of experience, Sam.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think there are many takeaways from checking in very well. For instance, you mentioned earlier on that the guest might just be unsettled and might be fearful, and you have to use your intuition to say, how do I really calm down this person without necessarily calling it exactly that, but in your checking in, you're actually addressing that. You also have the opportunity to fill in the gaps that you might have missed when you were doing the preparation with the guest. It could pop up there in the first 5 minutes that you didn't address something, and in the form of checking in, you could actually address it. For instance, if you forgot to tell the guest what is going to what what you are going to be saying about them, for instance, as the kickoff, or certain things that you want them to speak to. You might say, "Yeah, I know I didn't really tell you this, but at the end of the show, I'm going to ask you to tell people about your hobbies," something like that. During the checking in.
Yes, Sam. Your example is adept in that when you give the guest to a chance to do his introduction as well, you might have scripted and rehearsed with him. Especially, you'd often get some guests who might be nervous and say too little, or in the same vein, they could be nervous and start to say too much, and that would have obviously robbed your guests, your hosts, your listeners rather, Sam,
Mm,
in that you have other vital things that you were planning to discuss in the show, but now because you are going off script, you would obviously not be able to give them that valuable nuggets that you planned. So with the
yes,
check-in, you could quickly as well sense, okay, your guest is nervous. Maybe give him a little joke, or as you had rightfully said, steer him to share more of his information more towards the end of the show when you'll give him a chance. If you are managing time correctly, you'd have him a chance at the end of the
yes.
show where he can actually do that, Sam.
Yeah. I actually like this. What do you call it? You call it when you really make up something that was not in the show. I want to take example. Sorry, Maynard, we sort of like uh, uh, got taken off there. Let's take an example of what has just happened now. We are still in the checking in, and then somebody in the background in Maynard's side there comes in, and Maynard could have said, "Hey, the I have these buddies here. They want to be in the studio as well, guys. Unfortunately, it's not your turn." And it's during the checking in. Unfortunately, it's not your turn today. It's my turn to be in the platform. Will you just give me some time to be with my buddies on the line? The listeners won't actually, they will actually laugh. They will actually enjoy it because you are making it part of the show. I mean, that, rather than say, "Hey man, I'm in the studio, won't you just," you understand?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Because
it's
things,
it's one of those contacts.
yes. When something happens that you did not plan for, when it happens, integrate it in the show, at the same time address it rather than make it a distraction. Yes.
Yeah, exactly, Sam. I mean, it's part of that intuition I had also mentioned a couple of times, in that that respect for your listeners, respect for your guest. If you, I mean, we're human. You mentioned it, Sam. That's a very crucial element, that we are humans, and as much as we script, something can go wrong,
Yeah.
and when it goes wrong, it's the art that you need to develop and or acquire first, and then develop, of how to take that norma that happened and turn it into something which can still be in line with the conducts that we've outlined. So still maintain the level of respect,
Yeah.
still maintain that vibration that you've got going. Should not allow the disruption to become that. A disruption
To
should
take
be,
over. Did you see how
yes,
I also couldn't handle it well because I was like that was getting closer and closer to our setup.
yeah.
So that is the learning, and yeah, good example. We use that as a learning example. It may not.
Definitely, we learn as we grow every day. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But there is also this aspect. We tend to talk about the listeners and talk about the what do you call the guest. But what about ourselves? How do we settle down our nerves? What kind of tactics we can use? I know that, I mean, if you are a regular host, it's easy. You can refer to the previous shows and share with people how it has been going. But what else can you bring in if you feel like you yourself as the host, you are somehow unrattled.
If I can come in, Sam.
Mm.
One of the crucial learnings or teachings depends, how you look at it. That we also attained with the training that Kometsa, the program that Kometsa had offered, and of which we had graduated from, was that of being mindfulness, or being mindful of your inner self, your surroundings where you are in, to be able to take that edge off by even doing breathing, simple things like breathing. So this mindfulness exercises that we're doing also helps you to center, to take a step back, look at yourself and the situation from outside, and be able to then, with a clear mind, craft a way forward in terms of whatever hiccup that might be there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like the point you raised earlier on that we are human and things happen, and you can also be put out of balance. But then you must have these tools. Breathing is one of the good exercises to do, or just maybe clench your fists to act the emotions of the tension out. You know, without, at least with the radio, we won't see it, but you will take the tension out.
And something as well you mentioned, in the previous show, Sam. Uh, we've emphasized the positivity of doing a digital online show, where it will actually live, probably for as longer than you as a human being would probably survive at this planet. So it's important as well that the mistakes that we make, we try to massage them into some kind of lesson learned, or acknowledgement to the guests, to say, okay, we made this mistake, but we bounce back from it, even while we're doing the live show, so
Mm,
that that memory that we've put into the live environment, the living internet, which would never probably die for many lifetimes to come.
yeah.
It's important to, in that live moment, find that little breathing space of yourself to think quickly on your feet. How do I turn this little mistake into something less of a mistake, into
Mm,
something to say, I am human. I acknowledge I acknowledge my mistake. Respect my guest. I respect my audience, and then you made your mistake, but you still maintain the level of professionalism, the level of respect that you have obtained and worked hard to obtain from your listeners, Sam.
mm. So is that similar to what we people will call reflection? You need to reflect on the experiences, even from the mistakes, and make sure that you take something out of it, because mistakes can haunt you forever sometimes if you don't handle the feelings proper.
Yes, Sam, and I think definitely reflections is the correct word that I would also use.
Mm. Any views there, Maynard? I mean, I'm sure when you reflect on the previous shows, even those who were done by others, it was worse there because we'll have a show and then we'll coach after the show at the end of the show. And we used to have so many mistakes. And some of those mistakes stay with us. Someday it's easy to forget them. But it was good that we will debrief after the show so that people don't go home or don't go to bed with this guilt feel or self-judgment feeling.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we started the programs, we made a whole lot of mistakes. I think on every
Mm.
show,
Yeah,
we kept on doing mistakes, and yeah, after the show, we'll have another long calls like of rectifying such mistakes that we did on the show. But I think such kind of mistakes, they did build us for who we are today.
yeah.
And we definitely appreciate that we also learned from such mistake, because we definitely reflected on what happened on the show, and then we corrected moving forward.
Mm, exactly. Exactly. There's also a need for us to uh, um, to have a drive to better ourselves as we move forward. Yeah, so we also have a section here talks to connecting with the moment. I think we have touched on this, but the moment can be a bigger moment in terms of if you look at a bigger environment. Let's say you look at the country or you look at the continent or look at the globe. If there are things that have been happening on that day or the days before, and you're coming into the show and the topic is very related to those things, current affairs always become a spices in the topic. And I think listeners like that because if it was an event or incident, many of your listeners will be having it fresh in their mind. And when you bring it, they become very interested to hear your perspective on it. And currently, we are in the election mode. There's always something out there that is being said that you could bring in. You could say, listen, I was listening to this politician was talking about the importance of actual of internet. And then you could say, okay, we're talking about connectivity because streaming is about connectivity. That would be very interesting if that could end up being a program for the country, something like that.
Mm.
So that you give the topic, the current topic, a meat.
Indeed, Sam. And even though we might be have, like, for example, we were maybe planning to talk about uh, elections even,
Mm,
but something like the wars that's taking place in the world, where there's lots of people who are suffering, it's always important to also be cognizant of what's happening in the world, and part even of the check-in, part of that pulse. Maybe the nation that of listeners that you have might be in this somber, uh, you know, mood because there might have been some catastrophe that took place. I mean, recently something, for example, like UAE, where you find all of a sudden the desert is being flooded. I mean, that's something major. Then you'll find deeper into that, there's issues like climate change, which is being manipulated, science that's being
mm,
used, which is causing problems in that part of the world, but eventually it'll ripple over into other parts of the world as well. So those are very important things to just also be cognizant of. And like you rightfully said, our listeners might be thinking about those things, might be stressing about that. So that human element of linking in to their potential emotional level, it's also important in that check-in part, Sam.
mm, mm. How do you cope with this natural phenomena of judging yourself, even though you are so seasoned and experienced? Leonard, when you find yourself, the show is going, but you continue to judge yourself because you're not sure how you're coming across on the other side.
Yeah, well, I think such kind of moments maybe they can happen if maybe you've got a high profile guest. In that case, maybe you must start to judge yourself whether you are doing the right thing or not. Even though you think you are well experienced, but the minute you have a high profile guest, you might start shaking. So, but nevertheless, like I don't think you need to judge yourself when you are on the show. The best way is to let the show run normally, naturally, and then we can now judge after the show how we have done it. I think that will be the
Mm.
best way.
Or ask for feedback.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I agree fully as well with you, Maynard, in that you should not lose, your whole footing because you feel that you made a mistake or the show may not be going as you would like it to. Always look forward to completing and being professional, finishing off the show. Look at your post show analytics, listen to what you did, learn from mistakes, and also the platform, like we mentioned in the previous show. Your platform should be able to give you some analytics, receive some feedback, and most important, and it's another element of Cometsa itself. where we look at having coaches who can actually monitor and advise, and also experts who are resident show DJs, for example, who've
Yes.
gone through the program and graduated from the program, who can really give you constructive criticism so you can improve. It's very important, though, that the person themselves must be willing to learn and be willing to accept criticism so they can themselves grow, Sam.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very good point because you can only continue becoming better. And I think we must always take away this drive to wanting to be perfect, you know, that takes away the readiness to learn. Once you regard yourself as knowing it all, the learning is not possible. So it is quite, yeah. So it's quite very very important to be fully present. You spoke about mindfulness. I find that it's one of the biggest challenges we are faced as human beings with active mind, is to be fully present with what you are doing, and with where you are in the show, and 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 mindful of where you are heading to, and because you can actually be just fixated on asking what you want to ask and forget ground you have covered, and how far you have taken the client, the guest, and and maybe what is left on your script is no longer really necessary, because you realize that you're going to make the guests start repeating themselves, or even spoil the good show that you have had up to so far. Is it acceptable sometimes to finish the show earlier when you realize that you think you have exhausted what there was to be there? When you have now already started the show. I mean, I know I'm ahead of myself because this is almost like talking about now how to hold the show together. And I know that is a conduct that is still coming. Because the reason why I'm asking that is because you want to feel you've checked in, you've started, it's flowing. The only time you know that you've checked and started very well is when the show is running, right? But we're not at that module now. But let's touch on that as a way of bringing our conversation towards the end.
I think maybe it will be important when you are co-hosting the show, because usually if you are co-hosting the show, it's very unlikely to finish the show very early. Not unless maybe you are only the host and the guest.
Yes.
Then in that case, now you will need to delay other discussions. Maybe take, because I think you need to be mindful of time all the time. So if you think now you wanna run out of time earlier, you need to now start engaging deeply into other discussions just to buy time.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, and I think, by the way, it's possible actually to allow music to come in. Maybe you could say, let's take a short break, and I think maybe that is something we must fuse into our shows, especially longer shows. And during the time when the music is playing, you may recontract with the client, with the guest, to say, listen, is it possible to bring this angle, that was not in the show, but I sense that you are comfortable with it. Off air, basically, it's called off air discussion.
Yeah, I think commercial breaks are very important, like especially very on the 1 to 2 hour shows. Commercial breaks will be more important because sometimes just to dwell on the discussion for a very long time as well, it might be tiring as well for the guest themselves. So it will be important just to maybe break for a few seconds sometime in between.
Mm. Well, commercial breaks are not always about commercial.
Yeah, no, for sure. You can just play any music.
I think it's acceptable, Sam. However, if we stress on the planning before show, and also being cognizant of how the show is progressing,
Yeah.
um, with this being a seasoned broadcaster and having planned sufficiently with your guests, right? Like you're rightfully saying, you could bring in a different angle which you may not have covered in the show, or it could have been something you had planned to do, but because of the flow of the show, that specific area of discussion got sort of sidelined because you wanted to keep the flow. But you can then bring it back in to also then fill in the time that you would have maybe lost because you had removed that specific discussion point. Of course, once the flow has been established, like we've discussed in previous shows, that you continue with that flow because it's something that it's interesting, it's being discussed and enjoyed by yourself, and your guests as well are also probably enjoying it. But there's no big issue again. But like I say, ideally you would want it to run its course, and I would prefer personally with my shows where I run out of time rather
Yeah,
than I'm sitting with the airspace, which could be filled with music. And if we're successful enough, it could be filled with advertising, which somebody is actually paying for and using it to pay the bills. Uh,
yeah,
that's my view, Sam.
yeah, yeah. You know, I was just paging through all these notes. I realized that I don't know that you had the opportunity to look at it. I realized that a number of these points are really emphasizing the couple of few points, and maybe we could check out with those without really reading from our own notes here. What are the top 5 things that actually we have been emphasizing throughout, and it's also being emphasized by the manual here? I mean, when I look at the subtopics here, we touched on the objective of this checking in, the value proposition of it, how to do the introductions, settling yourself down, connecting with the moment, and then jump into the show. So, what are the top 5 things that will you say that if one doesn't want to go back to this note, you should always have in mind as the rationale why checking in better is important?
To me, I would say connecting with the listeners, like you definitely need to be present for your listeners.
Connecting with the listeners. Good one.
I think never forgetting that we are human and always be willing to learn and get to a point where you can think fast on your feet. So if something is not going the way you had planned it, you're adaptable
Mm,
to that change so that you
mm,
can bring everything back to a point which you can control.
mm, mm. I will add in settling down the guests, making them feel calm as well. The third one,
Uh, I think also it's very important to make sure because when you are connecting with the moment, you must not lose sight and track of what that show was actually going to be about. To bring back the listeners, uh, also part of calming the guests down as well, but bring the guests and the listeners as well back to the point of what the show was going to be about. So
mm, mm, indeed, indeed, because for your bosses, this is a program. You've been scheduled to deliver certain value to the clients, as listeners. You cannot start talking about anything that comes to mind. Yeah, yeah. And I also just feel that it's an opportunity to bond with all the role players. I mean, it's because it's almost like checking in is almost like informal part of the show. Do you agree? Informal but formal.
Yes, indeed, Sam. I do agree with you. It's a
Or
it's an art almost. It's not necessarily formal, informal.
an
It
art?
should it should come to a point where it's. I'm trying to think of the type of wording that you specifically would use. You talk about incompetent, not competent or unconscious
Yeah, unconscious
competence.
incompetence, unconscious unconscious incompetence, unconscious competence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. Yeah,
Yeah. So you
competency models.
reach a point where you unconsciously are being competent about what you are saying and what you are doing,
Yeah.
and it gets intertwined in your delivery and how you go about doing your show. So those elements you mentioned, which is important about the check-in, eventually with the practice, with the coaching, with the proper skills and guidance, you get to a point where you are doing it competently, but in an unconscious manner. So you're not even aware that you're actually doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think ultimately everybody get to reach that point, you know, because of repetition and familiarity and mastery, which is the ultimate that we want to achieve, you know. Yeah, beautiful. The time always go past so fast when we are reflecting on this. Because for us, I call it reflecting because we have, I mean, you guys have practiced this now. We are looking at it from a the trainer point of view, but it's really a nice revision, nice reflection. Yeah, we have 3 minutes to go. Let's check out. That was checking in, but let's check out of the checking in topic.
Yeah, that's a nice play on words, Sam. Uh, for my check-in, I would like to share with the listeners that with the Kometsa Digital Online Streaming Mastery Program, we're going to teach you the skills, do's and don'ts, but we would also help you with regards to feedback, give you the platform to express and develop your skills, but also help you on that journey to develop the intuition that you would need, where you would come to a level where checking in would become a unconscious competence that you will develop, Sam.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much, Divesh. Those are really wise words and good advice to those who want to master this part of hosting shows. Maynard?
Yes, well, yeah, no, it has been a very interesting reflection on our side. But all I can say is that, like, as a host or a co-host, we definitely need to be fully present all the time so that we can keep on hooking up with our listeners. And yeah, in that case, then we will be doing a very good checking up.
Mm, mm. Indeed. Thank you so much, colleagues. Wow. Yeah. One conduct out of the way, one unit out of the way. Very important one. I can always talk about it one again and again because as we host shows every week, every day, we do have to master this one. There's no way out of it. Maybe you can forget to check out, but never to forget to check in. Yeah. The next unit next week is unit number 11, conduct number 6, affirmation and motivation. God, we're now getting deeper into the real stuff. This is now when you are in the middle of the show. It's very important to affirm and motivate your guests, especially when you realize that they are being challenged.